The following is bonus content from Jonathan Satovsky's interview with Greg Harden. How can we overcome unconscious patterns from childhood trauma or old programming?
Quite an interesting question. And the assumption is, and people will hear the word trauma more than they hear programming. So it's important that we talk about unpacking social programming, which may include trauma. And so when we think about it, how I tend to focus on that issue is where you came from and what you went through is crucial to understand. But where you're going is where we have to have our commitment and our primary focus right now. So all of us will sometimes have to reframe a memory that we interpreted. Think about this. There's some memories that we have that were interpreted by an 8-year-old, by a 15-year-old, by a 20-year-old. Now I'm 32, I'm 42, I'm 52 years old. I cannot let that 8-year-old's interpretation of what happened remain and influence the way I see myself in the world. At 8 years old, somebody said, "You got a big nose." I'm 52 years old. I can't stand my nose. At 15, someone said, "You're too skinny. You're too fat. You're too stupid." And I'm still preoccupied with that haunting me in the back of my mind. 20 years old, 25 years old. There, as a healthy version of myself, a healthier version of myself has to revisit some of the things that I thought were true, absolutely true, that people said or people suggested, or things that happened to me, and how I interpreted those things, I can revisit and reframe. I blame myself for the abuse that I received from someone else. I'm beating myself up, and they were the villain. They were the enemy. They were the chaos. But I'm putting it on me. Something's wrong with me. I can, at a certain stage in my life, reframe, reinterpret, rethink, revisit, reinvent, re-engineer myself, and design a healthier version of me that understands the past is exactly what it says, PAST, previous actions, somewhere in time. I've got to let the past be the past. I've got to know my own baggage better than anyone else. And then take steps to unload it, reframe it, do whatever it takes to fix how I have been beating myself up and preoccupied with not loving myself, not having the same care, compassion, and concern I have for everyone else when it comes to me.
How have generational and cultural shifts caused you to adapt your communication style?
That's a really interesting question. And it's important that we understand generational differences, but we must resist the temptation to overindulge in labeling everyone from that generation to be a certain way. Their attention span is 8 minutes. They give me 90 minutes to work with a group. If I'm boring, I'm boring. If I'm not, I'm not. If I can maintain their interests, if I can include them in the discussion, if I can make them be a part of the workshop and have them teach each other, that's how you change it. But let's just think for a moment about how important it is for coaches, for CEOs, executives, managers, supervisors to understand how important it is to train themselves for cross-generational communication. You have to understand how important it is to know that your daddy's generation, your mama's generation saw the world differently. They trained you a certain way. Your old coach was woo, right? Your old boss was a certain way. But you cannot afford to coach or train or supervise or manage or lead your organization the way your daddy did, the way your old coach did. You have to be committed to understanding how important it is to study and train yourself to understand some of the nuances of working cross-generational. Then you got to teach the younger generation how to work with old farts. You can't just teach old farts to work with youngers. The youngsters have to have a clue. But even when thinking about generational differences, individual difference has to be factored in. You've got to see that how important it is to see Emily as Emily, not as a millennial, not as a X, a J, a Y, a Z, but as Emily, because Emily's view of the world is going to be unique, even if she was raised in a certain generation. There are people in this current generation, they show up in the workplace and they assume you're going to ask for their input. You're not going to just tell them what to do. You're going to ask them, well, what do you think about it? How would you process it? We value your opinion. In this generation, you need to value my opinion. It's money is nice, but I'm here to try to turn Maslow's hierarchy of needs on his head. I want to be self-actualized. I expect people to respect me walking in the door. In the old days, coach says jump, and they say how high. In the new days, coach says jump. Could you explain why we're jumping right now? Because I've considered this. And I used to jump, but it was based on a variety of issues. So if you're going to communicate, you've got to be able to understand that all people at any generation want you to care about them. If you're not leading with care, compassion, and concern, you've missed the boat.
Satovsky Asset Management, hyper-personalized wealth management that has created joy and abundance since 2007.